A very warm welcome to everyone here. I'm Rini, and on behalf of India FinTech Forum, I welcome you all to the online session on opportunities for FinTech companies in New York. This session is supported by Empire State Development. A few points to note before we go ahead. The attendees can enter their name and then post their questions on the webinar screen in Ask a Question panel. The questions will be taken towards the end of the session. The webinar will be recorded and it will be published on the YouTube channel of India FinTech Forum. And it is, and it gives me an immense pleasure to introduce the speakers for the day. Our chief guest is Mr. Randhir Jaiswal, Consulate General of India, New York. He will be giving the keynote address. We will have the opening remarks and theme address by Mr. Sreehari Marar, Director, Global New York State India Office. We will then have a presentation on New York's fintech landscape and opportunities for Indian companies by Mr. Satya Tagat. He is the Director, Software and Financial Services Sector, Empire State Development. Mr. RamKrishna is the co-founder of Zoreum Labs, and he will be sharing his experience on fintech investing in New York State. And then Mr. Tiwari, partner at Cyril, Amarchand, Mangaldas, will walk us through the overview of legal issues for inbound investments to USA. I welcome all of you here. And let me just quickly introduce our chief guest before I hand it over and welcome him to give the keynote address. Mr. Randhir Jaiswal is a career diplomat. He joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1998. In his over 2 decades of diplomatic career so far, he has served in Portugal, Cuba, South Africa, and Permanent Mission of India in New York. In between his overseas assignments, he served in New Delhi at the Ministry of External Affairs as the first as Deputy Secretary looking after the India's relations with USA, and then Joint Secretary managing India's relations with Western European countries. In the middle of 2017, he was deputed to serve the President of India as Joint Secretary, managing his international relations portfolio. He serves as Consul General of India in New York from 19th July 2020. Mr. Randhir Jaiswal is passionate about sports, environment, culture, monuments, old cities, and cuisines. He is deeply interested in strategic, sustainable development and public policy issues. He has been the part of India's delegations at various climate change conferences and was the lead negotiator for the G77 countries at the Rio Plus 20 conference held in Brazil 2012. I welcome Mr. Randhir Jaiswal and I invite him to give the keynote address.
Namaste. So very good evening to all our friends who are joining us from India, and a very good morning to our friends such as Satya and others who've joined us from New York and this part of the world. A big thank you to begin with to India FinTech Forum and to New York State India Office, in particular Mr. Sreehari Marar, for organizing this session. You know, when you talk of India-United States collaboration, financial and technology partnership, New York lies at the very heart of it. And for that reason, the engagement that we have today is meaningful, is one that is high on possibilities, and there's so much of strength to it. You know, we have business engagement, advocacy at the highest level. But in my understanding, What we do at the level of, say, India FinTech Forum or New York State Development India office lies at the center of this relationship. You are the nuts and bolts of this vast and expansive relationship. Secondly, all the people who've joined us are all young people. Today, we are talking about young people and their ideas. The median age in India is 28 years old, 28 years. So for all these reasons, the convening strength of the youth in India today, the kind of ideas they're coming up with, and the fact that all that New York State India office is doing and such organizations are doing, both here and in India, it brings you to the center of this relationship. That is how I see your work and how your work integrates into the work that we do in the economic space and other spheres. There is a lot that is happening in the fintech space in India. There is a lot that is happening in the fintech space here in the United States and worldwide. We are well into the digital age, and the COVID in some sense has pushed us hard into going forward. Last year, 20 to 21, we received $82 billion of foreign direct investments into India, a record of sorts. Majority of this investments came from the United States, and majority of that investment went into tech sectors, some of course, and many of it, of course, also in the fintech sector. The other sectors also attracted med tech, edutech, so on and so forth. So there is a lot, as I told you, the fintech sector in India and the tech sector in India is vibrant. There is, we are setting the digital infrastructure for ourselves in India, at the same time supporting digital infrastructure for the world at large. In the month of December, if you've noted the speech of Prime Minister of India, he spoke at Davos. He gave a very interesting figure. In the month of December, we had in India upwards of 4.4 billion transactions, $4.4 billion of transactions in the month of December. That gives you some idea as to, what's happening in the fintech sector, what's happening in the digital economy sector. I also saw a very interesting graph on MyGov a couple of days back. It said there are 600 million smartphone users in India. There are 550 million internet users in India. We have the cheapest mobile data. We have over 100 million daily online shoppers. 100 million daily online shoppers, and this figure to go up to 300 million by 2025. Well, if you put all these things together, you realize where you are headed. There's a clear idea of where we are headed in the next couple of years. That itself will give you the kind of opportunities that are there in India in the fintech space and between India and the United States. I'm sure some of our friends from this segment will be speaking more about it, but also to tell you that, we have undertaken several transformative reforms. If you looked at Prime Minister's speech, he talked about compliances. 25,000 compliances have been removed. We've also taken a large number of reforms, major reforms in the IT BPO sectors and the telecom sector that would help fintech sector and other tech sectors in India to grow. We recently had the Indian budget being adopted. It was announced. It brought in a lot of optimism and a high dose of positive market sentiments. Indian economy is to grow upwards of 9.2%. While the budget itself is for a year, but let me tell you, all the provisions of the budget, from how India is going to clean its economy, how India is going to adopt next generation reforms and embrace it, how India is going to move towards digital economy, what are the kind of new policy environment that are being put in place for startup economy, and many such new areas of work were laid out in the budget. So while the budget itself was for a year, in a larger sense, it laid out all that we have to do going into the future. I need not repeat about what's happening in the Indian startup space. We have upwards of 60,000 startups in the country. from a couple of thousands of just few years back. We have a large number of unicorns now, almost touching 100, which is a record of sorts in the last 6 months of this year itself. In 2021, we added a large number of them. So there is a lot that is happening in the space. We have here Ram, who's in the field of blockchain technology. So he will tell us more about his part of work. But let me tell you that we are here to support you. The Consulate is looking for new openings that we can do on the technology side, on tourism side, on trade side. And while investments are doing well, while the technology space is doing well, let me also tell you that the trade sector is also showing promising signs. This year we had last year that is a record growth in India-US trade relations. And we also seen record exports coming from India to the United States. We also set a target for ourselves, globally speaking, to export $400 billion worth of goods that we are well on our way to achieve. And we'll be setting a higher target for ourselves for the year to come. So all in all, it all looks good. We have movement happening on the trade side. We have a very strong movement happening on the technology side and also in the investment side. You put them all together and we have a very solid policy framework in place, as you saw in the various initiatives that are there in the budget. In the budget, if you read, there is now clear policy about cryptocurrency. There's clear policy and more focused policy on sunrise sectors such as drones, space economy, 5G, and many such areas. And all these things actually will help in a major way, will give a major boost to the fintech sector in India. Also, provisions such as that 600 villages in India to be connected by optical fiber. It speaks a lot, and new opportunities are going to be created in the fintech sector and in the larger tech sector in India. So that is how we are placing ourselves as we move into the digital age. But thank you very much for your very gracious invitation. And I look forward to learning more from other speakers. Anu is there, Satya is there, and Ram is there. And Satya, you are based in New York. We would like to touch base with you and see how best we can do things. We are looking at doing a collaboration on startup. We have something coming up in March, and we would like to invite you. We have an engaging relationship with New York State Economic Development Agency and with others in our area, but we want to touch base with you and invite you for some of our functions. Just to also let you know, Sreehari and other friends, that economic diplomacy and doing economic work is a very important part of our overall portfolio here in the United States. And we really, really value the kind of strength, the kind of cooperation and support we get from actors and stakeholders such as you. So thank you very much. And I look forward to the other speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jaiswal. We are very grateful to you for the time and effort you've given us. You've shared your insights and experiences with us, and the information that you've given about the Prime Minister's initiatives and how everything is inclined towards the growth of fintech ecosystem. So definitely thank you for that, and we hope to learn a lot from you as well. And with that, I invite Sreehari to give the theme address.
Thank you, Rini. Greetings for the day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sreehari Marar, and I handle the India operations of New York State, and I'm based in Chennai. So let me begin by thanking the Consulate General Randhir Jaiswal for his time and being with us today and giving us a good overview of the fintech ecosystem in New York, and also on touching base on the fintech ecosystem in India as well. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining in today's session. So let me start by quickly introducing Empire State Development, which is also known as ESD, the Chief Economic Development Agency of New York State, that encourages business development, job creation, and support local economies across the New York State through grant of loans, tax credits, and other forms of assistance. I want to give a little more background on the Empire State India office. The India office was set up in middle of 2019, and the main objective here was to help Indian companies understand the opportunities available in New York State and help them navigate through the regulatory aspects of setting up businesses and help them to make the right and the best decision for their growth in North America. We had missions to India in 2019 and 2020, where delegates from ESD team came down and was in about 4 cities and met with leadership teams of several Indian companies in various sectors, including manufacturing, pharma, IT, as such. And in the last 3+ years, we have had several Indian large firms in revenues of several $1 billion, and also very small firms with 1 to 2 employees. Also, we have helped them navigate through their decision-making process. I just want to highlight some of the high-level assistance we provide. So, as a first step, if any company is interested to expand to New York, we would help by giving all the stats and data that will help them to make that decision. So some of this would include insights on availability of labor, the skill sets of labor, a particular code that the company is looking for. So we will try to map that and find how many employees are there with that particular skill set, the labor cost, the cost of land and electricity, and various industrial clusters. The cost of land, electricity, and industrial clusters are mainly for manufacturing, because most of the manufacturing companies looks at several tens of acres of land and employ like 100+ staff. So that's mostly we have seen from the manufacturing space. And so once we give these data, the company reviews these data sets and express an interest. Once that is done, we would make the relevant introductions, which include connecting with accountants, law firms, and also arrange site visits to various shortlisted locations. We would hold companies during the entire course of their operation and want all these firms to succeed here and be the Indian brand ambassadors of for New York State. So for those who want to touch base with me, I'm based in Chennai, but accountable for most of India, actually the whole of India. So my coordinates would be shared later, and please feel free to touch base. If you have any projects or questions, I'll be happy to connect and discuss. But with that, I would like to pass it to Satya Tagat, who's the director for software and financial services sector, and he would give insights on the fintech ecosystem in New York and opportunities for companies in the state. Thank you. Over to you, Satya.
Thank you, Sreehari. It's great to good evening again to everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend this event. It's wonderful to be here on behalf of the state of New York. Just going to share my screen. All right, so as Sreehari mentioned, I currently serve as a Director of Industry Development for Empire State Development, which is the economic development arm for the state of New York. Our mandate is to support job creation and industry development and inclusive investment all across the state. So that's not just New York City, that's going to also be upstate regions, it's going to be Westchester, it's going to be Long Island and suburban areas as well. And we have a number of tools to ensure that we're successful at doing so. Some of these tools, which I'll get into more detail later on, it can include financial incentives such as tax credits, grants, or loans. It can be real estate development in terms of helping your firm find office space and ensure that you're connected into the right people based on what your needs are, and ensuring that if there are local tax incentives, that you're aware of those so that you can get the best cost possible when you're determining whether or not to open an office in a given location. It can include marketing, and not so much direct marketing for customer acquisition or anything like that. That would be outside of our mandate and not really the type of thing that we would do, but marketing more in the sense of networking services and ensuring that if there are fintech events or broader technology or venture capital type events and networking opportunities going on, that we can plug you into that and make sure that you have visibility. And then finally, on the small business services side, this would obviously be for earlier stage companies and might not be appropriate for the types of companies that are attending today's event. But this would be very early stage operational support, mentoring services, and basically connecting people with the nuts and bolts of setting up a business and how to get started here in New York. So how is New York supporting growth? There's a number of areas that I'd like to touch on over the course of this presentation. I think the key assets that we would highlight and the reason why so many employers are choosing to locate and expand within New York, the two main ones are our diverse and talented workforce and our educational facilities, which kind of leads into the future of our workforce and makes a very high quality of life for young families and parents here in the state of New York. So starting on the workforce side, we're #1 in the Northeast in total number of STEM graduates. We're #2 in the country for the highest number of residents who are scientists and engineers, and #3 in the country for high-tech employment. And the reason why these are important and why it kind of draws on our historical strength in financial services and technology is you have kind of a melding of the two. And if you think about kind of the household names of the biggest investment banks and the largest commercial banks, as well as, let's say, the FANG companies and the largest kind of mega cap technology firms, all of them have massive presences in New York. Most of them are actually headquartered in New York. And what that does is it creates an incredible ecosystem for talent and for new companies and for the types of new business development and new talent acquisition opportunities for earlier stage firms to be part of that broader ecosystem. The second column on this slide is the education system that really is the core of all of that. And there's really two pieces of that. It would be the high-end, more developed private universities, which include Columbia, Cornell, and NYU, with both their world-class business schools, medical schools, law schools, and engineering programs, as well as the largest comprehensive public university system in the nation. And one thing I wanted to mention that isn't actually on this slide is the public school system in the state of New York is consistently ranked among the best in the country, which is a huge asset for younger families as they seek to find the best education possible for their children. Then finally, on the right side of the screen, this is kind of a high-level rundown of the programs and incentives that are offered through Empire State Development. This could be tax-based incentives, operational support, innovation support. You'll also see venture capital and export assistance, and I'll get into some of these in more detail on the subsequent slides. Before getting into those details, I did want to spend a few moments just outlining what the fintech industry in New York has been, how it's been developing and why it's really thriving. And in my opinion, at least, and this is the industry that I specialize in covering, I think the core of this growth is that the financial services industry, let's say the largest investment banks and commercial banks, as well as the technology firms, the mega cap tech firms that I mentioned, they're all moving in this direction as the greatest sort of source of growth, whether it's payments or insurtech or kind of automating and coming up with a software or platform-based solution for a process that used to be very manual or labor intensive. And because of New York's heritage as really the best place in the world for a financial services firm, and over the last 2 decades, I would say a must-have presence, and in most cases a headquarters location for the largest tech firms in the world, kind of the marriage of the two has created this incredible fintech opportunity, and the industry has been just absolutely on fire over the last few years. So just to tick through some of the highlights of this slide, there are over 23 fintech unicorns that call New York homes, and there are over 1,500 active startups in our state today that are part of the fintech ecosystem. That ecosystem, 2021, obviously still feeling some of the effects of the pandemic dislocation, but it was actually a record year for the fintech industry. 27 billion in venture capital was invested across 528 deals, specifically in the fintech ecosystem. And I know there's a lot of different ways of thinking what technically counts as fintech, and it's a little bit of a nebulous area, but it's really all encompassing in New York. And whether you're talking about, automating some traditional financial services, blockchain, crypto, decentralized finance, and a whole lot of other aspects, those industries are not only taking root across the state and thriving, but the state is actively seeking to encourage their growth. So we're taking a regulatory approach that really sees the industry as a partner and ensures that there are clear rules that enable them to thrive, and they don't run into sort of the red tape that maybe some had feared that they would see as a new industry and a new type of business model. In terms of the commercial ecosystem, I already sort of touched on the marriage of finance and tech and why it's been so successful in New York. I would also mention that let's say availability of capital is also prevalent in the incubators, the accelerators, the VC ecosystem that exists in New York, as well as a number of dedicated programs within the university system, whether it's the private university system or the public side, and dedicated industry events such as the FinTech Innovation Lab or the InsurTech Industry Conference and many others as well. And the net result of all of this, the reason why we're seeing growth and sort of accelerating growth is that, as most of you have experienced, success leads to more success. And you have this kind of flywheel effect where once the network's in place, more people want to be here, which leads to more success, which leads to more people wanting to be here. So it's been really exciting to see the industry really take off in recent years. So to start talking a little bit more specifics about some of the support that Empire State Development is able to offer, I think the number one program that would be relevant for the companies on this call is the Excelsior Jobs Program. So the way this works is we seek to incentivize job creation all across the state. We would ask you to commit to creating a certain number of jobs over 5 years. We would work with you to make sure that your projections are something that your firm is comfortable with. Then based on creating those jobs over 5 years and maintaining them over another 5 years, so a total 10-year analysis period, that you would be eligible for tax credits. And the key thing to remember about these tax credits is that they're fully refundable. So a lot of early stage companies are obviously not taxpayers yet. They're still in growth mode. They're in a loss-making position, so they're not actually paying taxes yet. But at the state level, we view it as fully refundable, meaning the credits just become basically cash payments to the company at that point. And so we can get into that process in more detail on subsequent calls. But I think this core program of job creation leading to tax credit receipts for the companies that qualify, it's been incredibly successful, and it's been a great way for companies to expand and grow in New York in a cost-effective manner. We also offer grants, but frankly, grants are less relevant for the types of companies on this call. Those are really paid over time with very strict regulatory requirements and compliance requirements. As you can imagine from the state standpoint, because there's cash going out the door on immediately in the grant program, as opposed to tax credits in exchange for performance, the grants process is a lot slower and a lot more cumbersome. And it's really meant for much smaller kind of regional projects, or in some cases, kind of capital intensive factory building, neither of which are really the types of projects that fintech firms would be pursuing in the state. So in addition to the incentives, we also offer operational support. This can be in the case of office space. I mentioned the business mentoring program, entrepreneurship assistance centers, procurement assistance, and I think the piece that would be the most relevant for the individuals on this call is the networking opportunities. And so we have a number of industry groups that we're plugged into, and a number of VC groups that we're plugged into, as well as I would say fintech specific organizations that would be happy to make the introductions for, or if it's not the group itself and it's just the event, ensuring that your companies are aware of industry events and other kind of programming notes that you'd be part of. And the one thing I would conclude with on that piece is we cannot make introductions directly between private companies. That's just seen as kind of outside of what our regulatory mandate is. It's too close to business development for a private firm, but we can make introductions between private companies and either nonprofit organizations or just broader industry groups. And that's something that we're more than happy to provide. The innovation development support. I won't go through this in as much detail because a lot of this is really aimed at the hard sciences like biotech and nanotech and advanced manufacturing and things like that. But what I would say is that there are a lot of programs where fintechs are able to partner with either universities for workforce development, for internship programs, or for access to talent for the next wave of engineering graduates with financial degrees, or for product development where it might be appropriate as well. So there's plenty of support and plenty of chances for companies to kind of partner with, let's say, public entities or university type entities within the state. And then finally, the VC and investment funds. I think there's two buckets I would point to here. The first is obviously because of New York's heritage as the financial capital of the world, the number of venture capital firms, the activity that those VC firms or accelerators or incubators are driving is pretty much second to none, including Silicon Valley here, especially when we're talking about the FinTech industry specifically. So that's sort of the private sector side of things, and the value of being here and being on the ground to be able to be part of that ecosystem is just unmatched on the private side. It's also the public side of VC funding, and the state actually runs certain early stage funds that are certain funds that are meant for early stage companies. And we can get into more detail on that as appropriate, but essentially this is for early stage companies, usually in the Series A level fund, and we're trying to fill funding gaps. So basically, if your firm is interested in, let's say, locating in Rochester or Buffalo, where there's a ton of talent assets up there and a heritage in technology and financial services in both cities, that's where this type of fund would be applicable. Whereas if you're interested in New York City, for all the reasons why any firm would be interested in New York City, the ecosystem of private capital in New York City, and especially Manhattan, is already so well developed. There's just less of a need for the state to step in. So this is kind of a way for the state to put its stamp of approval and expand access to capital in some of the regions that have not had the same opportunity as obviously New York City. So I didn't want to talk about, I'll skip ahead just because I'm sensitive to time. I didn't want to talk about the regions and the industries that exist across the state. And I'll go through these quickly, but the way that FinTech firms have been thinking about this is not so much that, obviously there are no agribusiness firms on the call, there's no distribution firms on the call, but where it's been helpful is just in thinking of what are the end markets that we're selling into, and do our solutions fit some of these industries and some of the major employers that exist across the state as potential clients or potential sources for business development and revenue generation. So the capital region is home to Albany and a number of diverse industry clusters from biotech, life sciences, nanotech, and semiconductor development. Some of the household names that are located here: Global Foundries, hugely successful, which just went public last year, and then obviously well-established companies like General Electric and Regeneron. Central New York is more of heavy manufacturing, agribusiness, and brewing science, and you'll see Saab, Lockheed Martin, and Harris as some of the firms that are located in Central New York. Finger Lakes region, which is a vacation destination for people all across the country, and is also home to Rochester and some of the university assets they have there. The heritage of that industry is actually optics and photonics. So Xerox used to be headquartered, or actually is headquartered there, and some of the other firms that are located there are American Packaging Corporation and Bausch & Lomb, which is a major pharmaceutical firm. Long Island, incredible quality of life and one of the strongest growing parts of the state. The industries that are located there: aerospace, defense, pharma, financial services. Some of the firms that are located there would be Canon or L&K Partners. The Mid-Hudson region, which is just north of New York City, has biotech, life sciences, advanced manufacturing, and financial services. Some of the firms that are located here are IBM, Pepsi, and Legoland. The Mohawk Valley, which is a little bit north of the Hudson region, has industry clusters that are around distribution, materials processing, agriculture, and industrial machinery and services. Some of the firms that are located there: Remington, Briggs & Stratton, and Orgill. New York City, obviously we spend a lot of time talking about this. Pretty much every company, every type of industry has a major presence here, and I think the city sort of speaks for itself. North Country, again, has heavy industry located there, a lot of manufacturing, especially in aerospace. So you'd see Bombardier and Norsk located up there. The Southern Tier has Alstom, Corning, and Raymond, and these are industry clusters located related to insurance, distribution, and manufacturing. Western New York has a lot of interesting companies, and because this is where Buffalo has been, and there's been significant investment there, both from the public side and from the private side for cheap access to power and a lot of the engineering talent that's there, both from a heritage basis and from the universities that are out there. So you see firms like Geico and FinTech firms on the financial services or insurance side, and then Tesla, obviously, on the engineering and technology side. So just to wrap up, I did want to touch on quality of life in New York, because it's, the access to capital, the ability to grow and scale your business is unparalleled here. But if your employees or yourself are not happy with the quality of life, that it doesn't really make sense. But we're pretty thrilled with the way that the state has developed, and it's not just New York City and all the features and amenities of living in the city. It's also all around the state, with 6 million acres of parks, 14 major lakes, a ton of concert venues, festivals, and a capped level of property taxes. So the cost of living has actually been pretty reasonable here, especially relative to the level of economic growth that we've been able to generate in recent years. So with that, we're happy to take any phone calls or set up any subsequent meetings with any of the participants on this call. We're incredibly excited about some of the things that we're building in New York, especially on the FinTech side. And we'd love to work with your firm to figure out a way to make you as successful as possible here in the state. And with that, I will turn things back over to Sreehari.
Thank you, Sreehari and Satya, for your valuable contributions. To the attendees, let me just emphasize once again, the contact details are on your screen. You can see it under the speakers tab, as well as you would see that the logo alternates with the contact details of Empire State Development. So you can get in touch with the team through there. So moving forward, Sreehari, did you want to share anything with the audience?
No, not at this point.
Okay, so going forward, I invite RamKrishna to share his experience of setting up an office in New York, and take it from there.
Yeah, good evening all. My name is RamKrishna. I'm the co-founder for Zoreum Technologies Private Limited. Right now, currently based at Hyderabad. We have working offices in Singapore and as well as in New York. So what we do is that we are a technology-driven company, and we work in emerging technologies. Emerging technologies in the sense, our major segment is blockchain and AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we have been working in even recently forayed into fintech space also. We developed earlier application in supply chain management and logistics, catering to pharmaceutical segment. And recently we have expanded our portfolio to fintech. We are building portfolio management solutions to a client. We are building an enterprise application to a client. So the reason for me to set up a shop or an office in New York is pretty much sure that for a global footprint. So the core reason that particularly, especially this forum is on fintech. New York, you very well know that is a world financial capital, and the major two exchanges are world leading exchanges, NYSE and NASDAQ are there in New York. So I urge my fellow fintech company colleagues to explore these opportunities, and you have advantages because you can build international clients and it's a global market. Now India, many fintech companies are already explored, and I have also explored. So speaking to my journey of setting up incorporation the company, in New York is a good destination. Currently, we are having a virtual office in New York, and I have a resident representative there at in US dealing with the clients. So the incorporation in entire US is very pretty easy. I didn't find any hurdles, unlike in other countries. that is the best part of it. A very, very simple thing. Just your name. First, you have to see that the name is available or not. Mostly, if it is a unique name, it is available. And you have to give your mail ID and your postal address. That's all. The company incorporation takes place just like that. I think in 4 to 5 working days, we get incorporation. And the next step is that employer identification number, what in short is called EIN, and applying through that. And after you getting that EIN, that is employer identification number, you can open a bank account. And after opening a bank account, the payment gateway has to be connected. Then immediately you can bill to the clients. This is very simple. I didn't find, frankly speaking, any challenges in this process. There are many consultants who are very genuine, and the entire process is very simple. It's not that complicated, which I want to tell from this forum. And moreover, for fintech companies, if they are eyeing for a US market, uh, there are many incubators also who are there. Better take their support and services, because they play a catalyst role in entire process, not even just registration, in taking up to pitching to the potential venture capitalist. And they really play a good role. Please take help of such incubators which are there. And thanks to Satya, I made some of the note of Empire State Development, particularly the innovation development support what you are offering, the NY Star program. So even that, these are news which, like I attended, I made a notes. Definitely, I urge all other startups in this field take advantages of such programs. And this is the thing. And immediately the moment the bank account is opened, you can bill to the client. And every year, like it's a normal routine, you have to meet the regulatory requirements of filing tax and all. That's all are very reasonable cost, not that expensive. When compared to the business opportunity what you have, it is there. And establishing in New York definitely have advantages for fintech. As I've told, almost $50 trillion transactions are happening in top two exchanges, NYSE and NASDAQ. So serving many associated companies has real good opportunities for fintech, that too are in emerging technologies. The people who are working in all the emerging technologies, the fintech space, huge scope. And we are aiming a pie of it. And I hope my other fellow colleagues, with initiation of India FinTech Forum, where they have taken a good initiation, they can realize their dreams. So this is all about for me. I was asked to speak on challenges, but I really didn't find any challenges in setting up a shop in New York, frankly speaking. So this is all from Zoreum, team Zoreum from us. And I'm happy to collaborate in business also from the participants. You can get the contact details from the organizer. Thank you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. RamKrishna. That was really insightful and detailed. The process that you started with selecting a name and then going on to establish a company. Thank you so much for your inputs. And with that, I invite Mr. Anu Tiwari. And we see a lot of questions around taxations also coming up from the attendees. Mr. Anu Tiwari, if you could just walk us through the overview of legal issues for inbound investments in USA.
Thank you, Ms. Kumar, and the India FinTech Forum for having me here. Warm welcome to all the fellow panelists, and especially the Consulate General, sir. And I completely echo the points raised by Satya, Mr. Marar, and Ram. A quick introduction. So I've been based in the city of Mumbai in India for over 15 years. and looking at the field of technology, financial services, and fintech across banking, non-banking, payment settlements, as it used to be called, 5-6 years ago, till the word fintech was coined, including asset management on the securities market side. Increasingly, I think it's a no-brainer for any company to be any unicorn or early stage venture in India to have an eye in the US market, especially New York in particular. The people-to-people connections are extremely strong. I mean, last year's 44 odd unicorns, this year's 7 or 8 already in 45 days. You will find a lot of either through education or through work connections, either in the Bay Area or in the banking sector in the New York, the Manhattan area. And whilst inspirations are always taken from business models all over the world, but at least having been a part of the ecosystem for a decade and a half, at least I personally feel a lot of new models are being created in India. And at some level, the Indian ecosystem also has become a lot more muscular and robust, especially in the last 3 to 5 years, where the confidence required to branch out to not just look at the Indian economy from business standpoint or the South Asia or Asian. And we have so many examples of Indian companies, again, without getting into names, be it EdTech or food tech or travel ride hailing, where the Indian companies, which are now Decacorn Plus, have launched global operations. So not just as an investor, but as an operator in markets, including the US. But the trend, at least, which especially in the last 6 to 8 months, I have been seeing, being a transactional lawyer, is within a year of, Indian unicorns reaching a critical mass, they start thinking about global. Also, it helps that a lot of the capital that has come into India, and the Consul General talked about this, the number of the billions of dollars which have come into India, and last year being a record year. And the investor community also coming from the New York ecosystem or the Bay Area ecosystem, right? So the focus on looking at global markets, especially US in particular, which is an obvious first choice, is coming in very early on. So I recall when I started the profession, we used to hear about Tata Chorus, Tata Jaguar, the large deals where Indian companies went and acquired billions of dollars worth of value overseas. We are seeing that happen at a very early stage. I mean, this week itself, I was helping a few companies connect with advisors in US for understanding the process, due diligence, documentation for acquiring fintech players in US. So what probably one has seen in the US ecosystem, where once you get to a certain size and scale, you want to start growing not just organically, but also inorganically by buying players, comparable or otherwise. Similarly, a big trend seems to be coming up in India, and at least basis, our experience, ultimately, when the amount of funding which has come into India, at some level, it will definitely go into growth, but also looking at the trends in India itself, where a lot of M&A is happening within the, I mean, I won't call it startup because, who's a startup, who's not, is very difficult now to figure out. If you're valued over $1 billion, are you a startup, is up for debate. But the volume of domestic M&A in India has significantly risen. And on the back of that, once Indian companies start buying other companies, it's only a matter of geography, whether I buy within India or I buy, say, in the Southeast Asian geography, or I go all the way across the pond and start looking for acquisition targets in US. And just the number of pings, at least we as advisors get from Indian unicorn ecosystem for advice in terms of the legal regulatory process, what are the exchange control restrictions, and I'll come to that in a moment, has significantly increased in the last 6 to 8 months. Spending quick 30 seconds on how the process works, it, to my mind, has been fairly straightforward, as very rightly was mentioned by others as well. The routes are fairly straightforward, and there is a limit of $250,000 per person under a special route under which any individual in India can buy assets, including companies outside. So you think of a family of four, you have $1 million a year to buy assets, including companies, either as an investor or as an operator globally, including in the US. Similarly, large companies have a special route under which they can set up wholly owned subsidiaries, which is greenfield, or enter into joint ventures, which is brownfield, anywhere in the world, including US. There are usual reporting requirements which happen, in any cross-border transaction. There are certain limitations in terms of not over leveraging, keeping it within a certain net worth. When you sell something, you need to bring the money back into India to ensure it is accounted for here from a balance of payment standpoint. But net, at least as was very rightly mentioned by all participants, the process has been extremely smooth, straightforward. Any company in India looking for the first time or thinking about going global, and going global automatically involves having a place of business. So if you want to come to India and act as an operator, like there is a requirement to have a local presence, either through a branch model or a wholly owned subsidiary model. Similarly, to sell and to earn income revenues. And when you talked about tax, so of course it plays a bigger role in terms of structuring, but without getting into it. One needs to, when one thinks global, to have a footprint in that particular geography. And if you look at health or education, there are a lot of back office models, front office models, where the headquarters are in India, especially in health BPO and the tech, IT, ITS, BPO space, where the operating offices are in US, the headquarters are in India. So the process, at least in my experience, has become extremely streamlined. And I'll pause and then happy to really take any questions from the participants and the attendees. At least it to my mind, as I said in the beginning, it is a no-brainer for any mature founder who especially reaches a critical mass to naturally think about going global. And New York, at least in our experience, is always on the top of the mind of most Indian founders and investors.
Thank you, Mr. Tiwari. That was really insightful. And our attendees have a lot of questions for all of you. So let's quickly take a few questions from there. So Mr. A.G. RamKrishna is asking if we have, so he's talking about the regulatory environment in New York, in USA per se. So is the license required for each state separately, or do they need to have a license for New York and it will be applicable elsewhere?
Is this question for me?
Yes.
Sure. So it depends on the type of company. So a lot of companies are, the standard corporate structure is to be formally domiciled in one state and formally licensed in one state or another, and then just have the license to operate in other states as needed. So within New York, it's a pretty straightforward process to get the licensing done and to be located here. The question specifically asked about state-by-state licensing. I can't comment on the process in other states. I'm just not familiar with it. But I think depending on the type of company, you might have to get further certifications in other states. And just to give a quick specific example, financial services and insurance, because they're both basically banking extensions. Banking is handled on a state-by-state basis, especially the insurance side. Each state has its own financial regulator and insurance regulator. So you would have to get the licensing with the requisite authority. Here in New York, we're happy to make those connections and make sure that the process is as smooth as possible. So we're not a regulatory agency. We can't actually issue the license, but we can help you cut through the red tape and get a decision, very quickly instead of just waiting in line for months. So that's something that we can at least facilitate those introductions. There are other aspects like SEC compliance and FDIC compliance for financial services, if that's what your business model is. Those are federal agencies, and we just don't have the jurisdiction there. So it kind of varies based on what your business is looking to achieve.
And Rennie, just to supplement, in fact, to Satya, this always becomes an issue whenever an Indian company is looking at going global, especially in US, because of the federal state structure. And at least in my limited experience, always good to engage with counsel early on, as opposed to trying to do a desktop search on these items. And it all, at least in limited experience of working with Indian ecosystem launched globally from a cross-border India outward standpoint, it depends on activities. So lending can be state regulated, state by state. Payments, there are money transfer licenses, can be state by state. Platform businesses, again, depends on what the business is. I mean, motor vehicles, again, can be state by state. So always good to look at the activity and basis that engage early on to get a good sense, because of course, liability can be a big factor. So always good to go in with the work done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is another question for the Empire State Development. I think Sreehari or Satya, if you could take this question. So this is, as a fintech startup, there are many. Are there any benefits of starting a company in New York? That is what we've come together to discuss. And what are the services being offered by ESD, and what are the fees?
So there are no fees. All of our services are completely free. In terms of the benefits, I would, it's sort of the ones that I went through in the presentation, where from an operational standpoint, it's access to capital, access to new customers and new markets, and access to talent. So those are kind of the three big things. And access to capital kind of speaks for itself. Access to talent, I think, also speaks for itself. Just on the access to new markets piece, because for so many fintechs, their customers are going to be investment banks, commercial banks, hedge funds, private equity funds, or high net worth individuals. New York is the home to, basically the headquarters to all of that. So in terms of going out and driving sales and driving revenue generation, that's the third pillar that I because it's not directly in our mandate, I didn't spend much time talking about in the presentation, but that's a huge benefit. And then the services that we offer, again, it's what I mentioned in the presentation: networking, financial support through tax credit, primarily through tax credits, and some operational support, whether it's, the prior question was about the regulatory side of things. We can help you get those questions answered more quickly, and ensure that you're in the mix for networking opportunities where appropriate.
Yeah, I just want to supplement to what Satya said. So some of the questions that we can answer would be, we can give more insights on availability of a particular labor, the skill sets, the number of graduates from a certain university, cost for a person with certain experience, cost for a small office. All of this we can help company with. Yeah.
Great. So that would be a very good news for all the attendees, that the services are free and they can just reach out to the ESD team. So for Mr. Anu Tiwari, if you can touch a little bit on how can we register an entity sitting in India, and we are registering a company in New York.
Usually on this question, Reni, I advise the relevant client or participant to never try and do a DIU. It's always good to, as Satya mentioned, to have an advisor, because, and I can tell you from reverse, when a reverse happens, I mean, there are requirements in terms of apostle, notarization, confirming the directors, their credentials, because, like KYC, and KYC is not just, it's often talked about in the fintech world. When you set up something, ultimately any registrar of companies anywhere in the world wants to know who you are you genuine, are you blacklisted or not? I mean, the usual sense checks. So whilst definitely I've heard of market participants, Delaware, for example, is a jurisdiction which is the mecca of company setup in US, right? A lot of companies off late in India have gone and set up holdco structures there. But the short point is always good to have an advisor because how beautiful the liability regime works in US, you don't really have to. I mean, Satya probably is the best person to connect with to find an advisor who, I mean, you can blindly go in. I mean, that's the beauty of the ecosystem there. You don't have to do a sound check about whether the person is good, bad. Hopefully, there is a standardization of the advisors involved. So always good to do these checks first, as opposed to, you know, desktop search to set up a company. And actually, Ram's experience on this would be great to hear about.
Mine is very
Absolutely.
smooth. That's what I do. My experience, no challenges.
Okay, so moving forward, I think we will talk about 3 C's here. One is how New York is basically looking at startups that are into cryptos, so crypto. Second is the COVID situation that is going on, given that most of us are working from home or with a limited capacity at offices. How do we then set up or come up with an office and then hiring, etc. there? And the third thing would be cost in terms of money as well as in terms of time. So covering cost first, I would request Mr. RamKrishna to share his experience in terms of cost and money. What has been your experience in setting up an office in New York?
Yeah. Setting up an office, frankly speaking, the government fee is very, very less. And don't go by that government fee. Specifically, one should engage a consultant as advisor for this. Don't what Tiwari told, don't do it yourself. It might cost anything in between $2,000 to $2,500 for the company incorporation, that is limited liability LLC incorporation, and for EIN, employer identification number, and even for opening a bank account. So this is it might range anything between $2,000 to $2,500. Now comes another aspect. It varies from company to company. If they want to go with their virtual office, I think this cost it would be done. The virtual office, it might cost around $100 per month. A year it is around $1,000 to $1,200 on renewal yearly if you take 6 months or 1 year. So this is the basic cost, around $3,000 at the max. You can set up and have a smooth function. And particularly in FinTech, who are in crypto space, because earlier I was a CEO for a crypto exchange before taking my entrepreneur journey. If they want to open, apart from this company incorporation and setup, a crypto token if they want, there are certain what you call regulatory hazards. Even there, you can help, legal counsel would help. That cost would be anything around $10,000. Means if you want to issue a security token, if you want to, what sort of investors you are looking at all. So that in another $10,000, you can get that consultancy in crypto space. But if you are offering a technology platform, it is not the consultant fees is not that expensive. And to be very precise, around $2,500, you can set up your shop in New York. That's, I hope I have answered the question.
Great. Satya, if you could touch on the COVID situation there and, if are the businesses back to normal?
Sure. So I would say there's been different waves. The short answer is business is completely back to normal. And I think normal has evolved a little bit through the COVID situation. So employees themselves do not want to go back to the office in many cases 5 days a week. For some industries in financial services, especially investment banks, hedge funds, and private equity, they want their employees back 5 days a week. And so because of the dynamics of those industries where everybody's on the trading floor, or there's a culture that gets developed by being in the same office, those companies are back 5 days a week. But what I've seen from the FinTech companies that I work with is that it's usually a hybrid approach of, even though everything is open and ready to go, they're let's say 3 to 4 days a week in the office and 1 or 2 days a week remote. And that's both an employee retention thing and just a way of saying we feel like we can be sufficiently productive here while also getting the benefits of being in office, of building a culture and the productivity gains that sometimes come from being in the office. So that's the office piece of things. One other note I would mention there is that there's been kind of a bifurcation between the residential real estate market and the commercial real estate market. So on the residential side, rents are now at the same pre-pandemic levels that from December 2019. So the residential market is fully back. And I think what that is a testament to is that people want to be in New York, specifically New York City. And the rental stat that I cited is specifically for New York City. And so the vibrancy and the culture and the talent pool is not changed at all. You know, you see headlines once in a while of people leaving New York to go to some low-cost place, but that's just not really supported by the actual evidence of what are the apartment market trends like. So that's the residential side. The commercial side is a little bit different, where you're seeing deals get done for larger companies and some, let's say, Series B, Series C level companies taking up massive new office footprints and investing very heavily in their physical footprint. And again, these are all tech-first companies that performed phenomenally well during the pandemic. So it's not like they're unaware of it, but they're clearly seeing the value in investing in building out their office space. But commercial rent and the price per square footage is still meaningfully below where it was on the pre-pandemic. So that there's kind of like what I said was the bifurcation where the talent pool is back, the residents are back, the city is back, but the pricing is still much lower than it was on the commercial side. I think, again, because of all the factors everyone here is aware of, the availability of hybrid work and kind of the appeal of hybrid work, making there less of a bidding war for some of the office footprint. So all of which is to say, the affordability of establishing a presence in New York has never been greater. And maybe just the last piece on let's say the quality of life side on COVID, the mask mandate for indoor activity has been lifted. We still have the vaccination pass, where you have to show proof of vaccination in order to get into a bar or a restaurant or other venues. But it's unclear if that'll be, a permanent feature or if that will also be reconsidered in the coming months. But I would just say from living here and being on the ground, because there are no more capacity restrictions and there's no more mask mandate, and because pretty much everybody is vaccinated, it really does feel pretty much like normal.
Great. So just to add on that, since everything is very much viable and the environment is a lot supportive, so what are the incentives? What are the types of incentives and supports that are available for fintech companies in New York? You've already talked about it, but if you could just summarize.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fintech specific one, it's really an industry agnostic approach that we have for a lot of the support. So the tax credit, operational support, the help with site selection and finding an office and making sure you qualify for any local tax incentives to make the cost even lower. Those are all the same across industries, but I wouldn't say they're fintech specific. One thing that is fintech specific, and it goes back to the regulatory question from earlier, is because a lot of fintechs are basically creating new industries or building out new industries, whether it's crypto or blockchain related, or if it's maybe insurance or market making or trading related. We help facilitate those conversations with the Department of Financial Services, just so that questions can get asked and answered sooner, and you're not just sending an email to some inbox that you got off the government's website, but you can actually go speak to a person. So that's the only piece that I would say is meaningfully different than the usual services and support that we would give to any industry.
That would be a huge support, actually. And Sreehari, if you could just talk about how firms can engage with ESD to discuss potential investments.
They just need to call me or email me, as simple as that, yeah.
Okay, and I think we'll take the last question from Mr. Tiwari, and then let's wrap up. So this is something again to do with the registry of an entity. So can we register an entity in Delaware and have office and staff based in New York?
Yeah, can I take this question?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, Ram.
That can be possible. One can register at Delaware, which is the most prominent destination, or even booming state also, and have an office set up in New York. That's what I told. If you can open a virtual office even in New York and give that as a address for correspondence for all official correspondence to government agencies, that is possible. And you just take care of that. Each and every state has their own tax structure, but that is not that impacting factor. That is possible. But regarding tax, you can have a consultancy with your tax consultant.
And really, the principles remain actually all same all over the world. Registered office is for the purposes of typically litigation. It's your in a strange analogy, the given name, right? Then you have a corporate office, right? You can have offices all over. I mean, it's like you have you have a lot of designations. So, for example, Indian company law recognizes director, MD, VP, AVP. All of these are very colloquial designations. So, having a corporate office, satellite office, local office, like in India, you can have your registered office anywhere in India and do business anywhere in India. Right? Both have no correlations. Logically, the same it would work. But just one last point, given I know we're short of time, what Satya mentioned. I think fintech as a word, at some level, a lot of people get confused what fintech is. Probably there's only one hyphen tech, which is very hard to define. If it's food, pharma, ed, all techs, you have a sector, because fin by its very definition is financial services, right? So always good to see what main objects with which you want to register your company, either in India or Singapore or Beijing or Tokyo or New York, right? What is the activity you want to do? You can never say, I want to do fintech. That is not an activity. It can be payments, it can be lending, it can be asset management, it can be crypto, it can be exchange, because it's the activity which will determine whether you get regulated, if or not. I mean, defense, for example. The point I'm making is, there are in every country sensitive sectors also. You can't say I'm a fintech and I'll print notes, right? So the point I'm making is, it's always good to look at the activities that you want to do, to firstly get a clear picture on what is allowed, what is not allowed. I mean, hopefully most things are allowed in US, and to see what licenses are required and what are the special conduct rules to do that business.
Absolutely. So with that, let's wrap up. I think we've taken most of the questions from the audience. They are eager to get in connected with the ESD team, as well as all the other speakers. So I thank everybody present here, especially our speakers, Mr. Satya Tagat, Mr. Sreehari Marar, Mr. RamKrishna, and Mr. Tiwari. Thank you so much for giving your time and support for this webinar. And thank you, Empire State Development Team, for supporting the webinar. And going forward, if you wish to organize any kind of webinar in collaboration with India FinTech Forum, you can write to us at info@indiafintech.com. And definitely the key takeaways would be Satya has already shared a lot of support, and the other topics have been covered by all our speakers. Don't do it by yourself. Take the support of the team here. ESD is there to help you out. And with that, I thank everybody present here and wish all of you a very good weekend.